What's going on, guys? JPS back for another video, and today we're going to be reacting to how the internet in Germany is totally different than in America. For those of you who don't know, I'm currently in university right now and I'm studying information technology or information systems. So I've taken a lot of classes about networks, communication systems, software, hardware, programming courses. So anything relating to technology, and obviously the internet is very much of interest for me. So I'm curious to see how it's different in Germany. With that being said, let's get right into the video.
It is known as the World Wide Web, but does that necessarily mean internet surfers in Germany and the US will have the same experience using it? Hey guys, and welcome back to our channel. I am Donnie.
And I'm Aubrey.
And we are two Americans currently... Shoot, hold on. Sorry, today I was trying to have the hologram live stream, but clearly the Wi-Fi here is way too slow. Anyways, we are currently living in Germany and sharing all of our experiences living and traveling throughout Europe. With different laws and regulations, websites geo-blocking access to people in other countries, or even just differences in acceptance of digitalization amongst nations, we have found that the experience using the internet can be very different depending on what country you're accessing it from. In fact, one of the biggest culture shocks for us moving to Germany was firsthand experiencing the lack of digitalization in much of German society and bureaucracy. DW News described this.
Before we even get into this, I'm sorry. I was just shocked last summer when I visited on the reliance of cash. I get it, Germans are much more reluctant to give away their privacy and data, and that's amazing. I wish we could be that way. But in the United States, to live in this society, you have to kind of tick off those terms and conditions. We don't really have as much of a choice. So yeah, it is interesting to see the lack of digitalization throughout Germany and how it's, you don't need the digitalization oftentimes.
State of digitalization in Germany like this. Schools with outdated computers, health authorities relying on fax machines, town offices that offer few or none of their services online. That's the reality in Germany in 2021. So what has our personal experiences been with the internet in Germany versus the USA? Well, that is exactly what we are going to talk about today in our video. Technological Unterschied, website speeds and TLDs. In the same DW article that I mentioned before, they expanded on the internet and tech situation in Germany by saying, in a recent EU report, Germany was ranked 21st out of the bloc's 27 member countries, plus the UK when it comes to offering online services to its citizens. Several months into the pandemic, health authorities were still reporting case numbers using fax machines. People had problems working from home due to patchy internet connections, and across the country, schools lacked basic technology for remote learning. Now, statements like these offer a pretty bleak view of the internet in Germany, and is probably a pretty broad overgeneralization. So I want to share with you what our personal experience has been, and I want to start by focusing on one thing mentioned in that article, and one thing Germany has become somewhat infamous for: patchy and slow internet connections. To benchmark, according to speedtest.net, the US ranks number 13 in the world for average fixed broadband speed with an average download speed of 203.81 megabits per second. Rather than try
That's like almost exactly my download and upload speed. That's crazy.
And talk about the entire US, I'll focus on where we are from, Oklahoma. Oklahoma is the opposite of densely populated and for the most part fairly rural. It ranks nearly dead center in 26th in broadband access amongst US states. Only 25.9% of Oklahomans have access to fiber optic service, but 78.1% at least have access to broadband 100 megabits per second or faster. Note, that is data for having access, not necessarily actually paying for having speeds that fast. Germany, on the other hand, ranks all the way down at 35th in the world with an average download speed of 136.66 megabits per second.
Dude, they're under like Lithuania, Malta. And the crazy thing is, I feel like Germany is very high among statistics and standings for a lot of different metrics. So the fact that they're so low on the internet, I think the shocking one was within the EU being ranked that low, below a lot of Eastern European countries as well. That's surprising. That is very surprising.
Which honestly did surprise me that the average speed in Germany was that high. There are other factors that can hinder speeds to consider as well. For example, German homes tend to be built with much thicker and denser walls than American homes, which can hinder Wi-Fi connections. With all the horror stories that we heard about internet speeds in Germany, and based on their global rank with internet, we expected when we got here to struggle with very slow internet connection, and in particular, since we make YouTube videos, we thought for sure it would make uploading them more difficult. But for our needs, and honestly, based on what we have experienced in other parts of the globe, we certainly haven't had a complaint about our internet most of the time, and it has been fine for our particular needs. And our internet is by no means blazing fast, and for the internet package that we have, we get only about 40 to 43 megabits per second download and around 4 megabits per second upload. But that is also when only one person is using it and with one wall between me and the router. It is not uncommon for our internet to slow down to the 20 megabits per second range. In Germany, fiber optic cables have been invested in only a few specific places to deliver the best internet speeds. As of June of 2020, Cologne had the best coverage of fiber optic cables at about 80%, Munich at 75%, Hamburg at 72%, and then that is when it all drops off, and in particular, rural parts of the country. In Germany, most internet is delivered by old copper wires where fiber optic cables haven't been put in. We are actually about to move homes within the same town here in Germany, and when we looked at the connections available to the new home from the different major providers, we were looking at only having up to 16 megabits per second download speed available to us unless we got a special LTE plan from Telecom. However,
God damn. I think I remember when I was like connected to networks last summer, I would run speed tests, and they often were like 20 to 30 megabits per second download, which is, you know, it's not like the worst thing ever, but it's not ideal. Another thing is, I heard in a previous reaction I did that it's very difficult to get internet in Germany, like when you move somewhere, and that oftentimes that arrangement has to be made months in advance. I don't really know, but like I heard that can be a pain. So it seems like Germany is definitely a bit behind when it comes to internet, especially looking at those statistics about the fiber optic cables and their lack of implementation, and still relying on, you know, stuff that we were considering old. Like fiber it's already been really popular in the United States for a long time, but it's becoming the standard at this point, especially on the East Coast.
However, that was until our future landlord informed us that they actually just put in fiber optic cables to the house, and we could get much faster internet, and probably the fastest internet we have ever personally had. But I do want to know from you, what are your internet speeds generally, and what have you experienced in terms of internet connections in Germany or other parts of the world? Real quick, I do want to run a little test. Let's see how long your internet and mine takes to send me a notification that you have many, if not most, American local news websites geo-block European visitors from their sites. Geo-blocking simply means that a site blocks users from accessing it purely based on the geography that they are accessing it from. For example, if we want to access our home city's local news, KFOR, if we go to their website, we get this message. But it isn't just our small.
That's why you get a VPN, bro.
All capital cities news. It is also higher profile sites like the New York Daily News or Orlando Sentinel. A 2018 article by the BBC explains this by saying, the websites went dark in Europe after the General Data Protection Regulation GDPR law came into force on the 25th of May. GDPR gives EU citizens more rights over how their information is used. Under GDPR,
yeah, I mean, I don't know what they expected passing that, bro. You think the United States companies are gonna take that? No, we cannot allow you. We can't, we need those cookies, yes please, and we need just all your personal data. So if you're not going to give it to us, you can't join our sites. Come on, guys. This is how this country works. This is so... When I saw that, I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they definitely...
GDPR gives EU citizens more rights over how their information is used. Under GDPR, companies working in the EU or providing a service to people within the EU must show that they have a lawful basis for processing personal data or face hefty fines.
If that was in the United States, you don't need to have a lawful basis. The need for processing personal data is dinero. There's no lawful, it's just money, bro. That's all it is.
Agencies and other websites in the US have come up with ways to be able to comply with the EU regulations so that us over here are able to access their websites. But even 3 years on, there are still a lot of websites that have clearly determined there aren't enough Europeans interested in small local American news sites to change in order to accommodate those visitors and EU regulations. Until this happens though, there are always VPNs, which by the way, this is not sponsored, but if you are interested in a VPN, we do have a link to the VPN that we use, ExpressVPN, in the description of the video where you can get some sweet deals if you sign up with them using our link. Sites back home geo-blocking us from accessing them is not the only thing that the GDPR also changed in how we experience the internet over here. One thing we also notice every single time we want to access a website once we moved over here is that any and nearly all websites we get on, we never get to just simply surf that site from the moment that we click on their link. Instead, we always have an annoying pop-up asking us to give consent for cookies. Now, I say it is super annoying and I find that it is in a minor way, but termsfeed.com writes, on the face of it, cookie banners may seem like an unnecessary annoyance, but there is a reason that governments are becoming more concerned about regulating online business activity. Along with the GDPR, the e-privacy directive was passed, and websites needing to comply with these new EU regulations have had to add a pop-up that looks something like a variation of this, and you have to either give or deny consent to their cookies. In the US, however, asking for consent to cookies is not required and therefore isn't always requested. To confirm this, I did some very important journalistic.
It's definitely not required, but I've seen a trend over the past couple of years where there's a lot more of those pop-ups asking you to allow. And also there's a lot of pop-ups if you have an ad blocker, they want to get their ad revenue in, so we'll see if YouTube ever takes that at some point. I don't know.
And scientific research by texting my brother in the US asking if he has to answer any annoying pop-ups every time he gets on a website in the US, and his reply was, I think that may just be a Europe thing. I feel like I get that pop-up very rarely. It happens sometimes, but definitely not all the time. Therefore, in the US, he is still surfing internet bliss as he simply clicks on a website and just immediately starts scrolling for his entertainment and completely avoids this 2-second hindrance and annoyance. All while getting his information stolen, I guess. When we look at a list of the top websites according to similarweb.com for the US and for Germany, we see a perfect example of the next difference we did not anticipate before moving here when it comes to internet use between Germany and the US. Somewhat not surprising, the top 3 websites visited in both Germany and the US are the same massive global brands, but number 4 and number 5 in Germany was the surprise for us. Specifically, these parts. If you don't know the term top level domain, or TLD for short, this is what the last few letters of a website is called. By far the most popular TLD is of course .com. However, there are more specific and special TLDs known as country code top level domains, or CCTLDs for short. These are special domain names that are country or region specific and designate which country that particular website is trying to service. For example, .UK for the United Kingdom, or .cn for China, or .de for Deutschland. And Germans and probably the rest of the world are much more aware of CCTLDs than Americans are. In April 2021, Statista released data showing the most used CCTLDs in the world, and we can see that Germany's .de is the 3rd most used because so many websites in Germany uses this rather than .com. This is one thing we have now had to get used to using, because one thing that you will notice missing from this list of top 10, which might seem a little bit strange, is that the US is not listed in a list of top CCTLDs. 1, you might be thinking, well, that's because the US doesn't have a CCTLD, or 2, that's because the US CCTLD is .com. Well, unfortunately, both of those thoughts are actually wrong.
Well, it might as well be, because companies run the country. But interestingly enough, I learned about domain name system in this previous semester, so I was learning about all the different types of servers, the root servers, authoritative servers, top level domain, all that stuff. So this video is really perfect for me right now.
wrong. First, .com is not the US's specific website designation, and US does have a ccTLD, and in fact, it was the first invented ccTLD, .us. However, it is extremely rare for Americans to use a website specific to the US that uses a .us address, and I would venture to say that most Americans may not even know it exists. The only website in the US's top 50 most visited websites that even uses .us is zoom.us. The very quick and the most popular explanation that I have found online from a couple of different forums talking about why the US doesn't use its own ccTLD is because the US invented the TLD system before ccTLDs came along, and therefore we just stuck with what we were already using, .com rather than .us. Of course, this is an oversimplification and not every US site is .com. So then maybe the question becomes, why do other countries use a country-specific TLD rather than just using .com like in the US? And for example, why do we need to use Amazon.de in Germany rather than using Amazon.com? Well, the answer can be quite simple. It was very frustrating when we first tried to use Amazon.com over here, and most products we wanted to buy, the seller wouldn't ship to Germany. But luckily, Amazon recognized that we were in Germany, suggested that we use Amazon.de, and that's when we learned this site is specifically targeting a German demographic, and therefore what we find will be able to ship to us over here. There are other pros, like the prices default to euros, and for Germans, it actually is in German for them, although we use a special version called Amazon.de in English most of the time. But so therein lies the answer for why countries use their ccTLDs. Users in a specific country are able to determine that a website that ends in their country's ccTLD is going to give them the most pertinent and specific information to them, rather than a frustrating site that the information is more internationally generic, or for example, may not actually even ship products that they sell to their country. Now, as a quick side note, just looking at these lists, you can see that there is not always a .de version of popular websites, and in many cases, if you type in a popular website followed by .de, it will just redirect you to the .com version of the website. For example, type in youtube.de and you will immediately just be redirected to youtube.com, although this is not a hard and fast rule for websites.
Pretty interesting stuff, honestly. I had no idea that that was even a thing, honestly, the whole .de, but it does make a lot of sense and seems a lot more convenient.
Based on the last difference, this next difference is more obvious to me now, but at first, after moving here, was a very big frustration for me. I went all out in my attempt to integrate into my German life, and also I wanted to give myself a challenge in learning the language. So I switched my phone completely over to being in German and setting my country profile of my phone to Germany. This inevitably changed the way that my phone searches the internet compared to, say, Aubrey's phone, which is still set up with the country profile of the US. The biggest, most annoying difference between searching the internet between my German settings and my old American settings are when I am Googling for football scores.
Really?
American football. If I want to know what the score to my alma mater's football game over the weekend was, I simply Google Texas A&M football, and on my American device, I didn't even have to click on a website to find the results because Google just told me the score to the last game at the top of their page. However, now that I am searching for scores on a German device, Google works a little bit differently, and I guess assumes that a German wouldn't really be interested in that information, so I don't get the simplified, straightforward answer at the top of the page. Rather, I have to scroll through websites to try and find one that has the updated scores on it. Now, based on the last difference with ccTLDs, of course this makes sense, because my phone is set up as a German device. If Aubrey and I Google the same thing, we will definitely get different web results, no matter the subject. My phone will often give preferences to .de sites on that topic because the information is geared specifically for a German audience, whereas Aubrey's phone, set up as an American device, will pull up mainly .com sites or sites in English geared towards her demographic.
Okay.
And finally, of the websites most visited in each country, an interesting thing I noticed is about the American developed and owned app, WhatsApp. The first time that we talked about WhatsApp in a video, our German viewers didn't believe us that Americans don't use or don't even know about WhatsApp in many cases.
Dude, I literally didn't even know like WhatsApp really existed before I started coming over, because like everyone uses WhatsApp in Europe and in the UK as well. The UK is kind of in Europe, but it's like complicated. but you guys get what I'm saying. Like, it's really a universal thing, and that is nice. But here in the United States, it's like everybody has an iPhone, so we just use iMessage. And if you don't have an iPhone, then you're excluded. So that's why everyone has an iPhone. And a lot of people in the United States don't realize that the rest of the world isn't like us. Like, people are so shocked when they hear the population of Android users in the world. They're like, what? There's no way. There's no way. Like, everyone has to have an iPhone. They're going to have the green text bubble. It's like so stupid. But anyways. Yeah, but WhatsApp is cool. I'm not the biggest fan of its like user interface sometimes, and they keep getting like invited to a bunch of scamming groups and stuff. They keep adding me, so like that's a bit frustrating. But I mean, even with my normal number, I'm always getting scam calls and telemarketing and stuff. It keeps getting worse, it feels like. I don't know.
All the rest of the world depends on it. To further prove this point, WhatsApp ranks as the number 26 most visited site in Germany, yet isn't even in the top 50 in the US, and honestly, it may even be much lower on the list, but I would have had to create an account and possibly pay to access the information, so forgive me, but just trust me, Americans don't even know what WhatsApp is for the most part. Something that you can tell from this recent tweet from Casey Neistat as well. I hope that you enjoyed seeing those few ways that surfing the internet has been different in our
Alright guys, that was a really good video. I learned some things that I did not realize. The internet in Germany is very different than the internet in the United States. But it's still, it's still good enough to get by with. Let me know your own comments about the internet in Germany, your own experiences with it. You guys think it's good? Do you think it's behind? Why is it behind? Is it because of the bureaucracy? Every country, of course, has a bureaucracy, but Germany's bureaucracy has been cited as being, slow at times, especially with things like internet. But it's interesting too because Germans have such a different view on privacy, especially online privacy and data collection. So seeing that in 2024, where everything's so fast moving, everything is big data, I just wonder how long that's gonna last. It's a great principle to have, so I hope you guys are able to keep that, because going the other way kind of puts you in a surveillance state, which we've noticed in the United States, and it is a bit overboard. Like, we have people know way too much about us. Our companies know our entire life story at this point, so we're screwed. Thanks for watching, guys. Hit the like button, hit subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.